Now, interesting things. I wanted to talk about the circle of aids, right? And it's a term that I'm familiar with from my time in the US, but it's a term I hadn't really heard in Germany before I went to the US. And now that we're back in Germany, it's not a term I really hear being used in Germany. So I did a little survey. Turns out most Germans had never heard of that. How is that here with all of you? Are you familiar with circle of aids? Are you not familiar with circle of aids? Would be interesting. Do you have any idea what it means? So that would be, let me know real quick, who knows, who has heard of circle of aids and who hasn't? I would assume that the number of English speakers is higher than the number of German speakers, but I'm curious, and would like to know. Okay, Jane, Amaku, never heard of it before. Good. Susan says, no, I have not heard, but can imagine what it might be. It's somewhat descriptive, yeah, Catherine. Yes, circle of aids, exactly. It's a useful concept. Oh, Hazel says there seems to be an echo on the audio. Does everybody have that? Okay, Tina, Annelie, Velima, never heard of the term before. Okay. Morgan Osborne can take an educated guess, but no, thanks. Sharon just brought me one. Tyree says, I've heard of that expression. Debbie Marshall heard of it in South Africa. Kelly, haven't heard of it in those terms. Inka says, well, I was still in Germany, I never heard of it as well. We actually never got explained to that. Yeah, that's the old German way. Is that once I moved to the US and started to study with classical trainers, all those things started to surface. Okay, Mary Patterson, have heard of it. Eva Su, yes, heard of it. Okay, good. Yeah, so the Americans are familiar with it for the most part. Huh? Interesting. So Mira Peters heard of it, but don't know exactly what it means. Awesome. So then I will explain. Let me see. Okay, Jeanette says, I heard about it from you and read it, but not so long ago. James Purcell has used different aids independently. We'll get to that. And okay, Rochelle says not used in Australia. I don't think that's interesting. Then who's that? Damn, it cuts off the names here. Sometimes I can't. Let me see. Corinne, yeah, probably Corinne. Says, what is it? Not gonna find it again. I'm roughly familiar with the concept of circle of aids, but its implementation remains mysterious. It helps with a visual representation. Awesome. So we will explain the implementation because it's actually not that difficult to do. Jen Simmons, yes, Costa Rica, US. Okay, circle L wrench. Heard of it, and you know it when you feel it. Absolutely. Melissa Tower, I've heard the phrase, but never learned what it means. Very good, very good. Yeah, so that gives me a bit of an idea. Okay, Shana just sent me here.
I'll post it in the Facebook Live, but you'll need to do it in the...
Okay, in the Zoom group, we have a PDF. Shana's made a nice PDF again, as usual. So
this one actually has words.
Not just pictures. Good, not just pictures, but has words. Even better. So then let me go and share that. And I'm hoping that you will actually be able to see it when I share it in the German broadcast. Apparently they couldn't see it, which is super annoying. Sometimes it happens that the screen stays black for whatever reason when I share a file. It's the keynotes, when I share a keynote. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So Shana will monitor a little bit, let us know if the screen is black or...
Now it's showing.
Okay.
It was black and then it started showing. So, woo!
Good. Yeah. Sometimes when I hit play on the keynote, it doesn't show it for whatever reason. So now, so here we have a picture of a horse and a rider, and you have little arrows, right? The pink arrows and the blue arrows. So the idea of the circle of the aids is that you create an energy flow that goes through the horse, and it's a little bit like an electric current in a sense, right? It begins really with the hind leg that's on the ground that is lifting and pushing the body mass forward. You can almost visualize it a little bit like in pool billiards, you know, where you hit the ball with a cue, you know, that's the impulse of the cue sends the ball rolling. And then, you know, if there's another ball in the way, it just, you know, passes the impulse on, the next ball gets rolling and so on. And that's what happens with the horse, right? So the hind leg that's on the ground and that pushes sends an energy impulse out that will travel along the horse's spine, like from the pelvis to vertebra to vertebra to vertebra, you know, until it reaches the pole, and then it essentially drops down the skull to the rein. So, and that's the same whether you're riding with a bit or with a bitless bridle. You know, if you have a bitless bridle, then you feel that impulse through the nose of the horse, you know, it communicates itself to the reins. If you're riding with a bit, then you feel it through the lower jaw. So, but it arrives there, right? If it gets transmitted like that. And that impulse is something you feel in your hand, right? You can feel the hind leg as it then touches down. Left hind leg you feel in your left hand, the right hind leg you feel in your right hand. And from there you can recycle that energy impulse back through your seat to the hind legs. And that closes the circle of aids, or the energy circuit. It's really an energy circuit. I always like to think of energy flowing through the horse and through the rider's body. And sometimes I visualize it like water, you know, flowing like a creek, you know, or, you know, like a canal, or sometimes it's like an electric current in some ways, right? So now, in order to be able to make this happen, your seat has to meet certain requirements, so to speak. So in order for your lower leg to be able to get the ball rolling, so to speak, and to bring, you know, the hind leg underneath the body, you need to have a light contact essentially with your leg, because you need to feel what the horse's rib cage is doing, what the hind leg is doing, right? And your lower leg is in touch with the belly muscles of the horse that bring the hind leg forward. If your lower leg is not in touch with the horse, then you don't really know what's going on, so to speak. You cannot feel, you know, what the rib cage is doing, what the hind leg is doing. You will not be able to feel the right moment for a leg aid. And when you apply a leg aid, you have to bridge the gap between your leg and the horse's belly, which means then by the time your leg hits the belly, touches the belly, it's too late almost, you know, for the aid. So it would be very difficult to get the right timing. And it will also be difficult to get the right amount of the aid, the right intensity, etc. Because if you're not in touch, you have no sense of what the horse needs at that moment, right? And how receptive he is. And plus when there is no prior contact and then your leg touches the horse out of the blue, the horse might get startled, the horse might get scared, right, of your leg aid. They might be, you know, ambushed. So for all these reasons, you should have a light contact, a light connection from your calf to the rib cage, right? So you feel what's going on. You feel the moment when you need the aid. You feel, you know, what kind of an aid you need to give, how big, how light, how, you know, long, how short, etc. Yeah, and then that impulse that is transmitted through the horse's spine has to travel through your midsection, through your pelvis, which means you have to have fairly supple hip and knee and ankle joint. So your pelvis can allow that impulse, that movement to travel along the spine, because if you're stiff in your hips, you will block it. It's a little bit like having a bunch of rocks in the middle of your creek bed, you know, that will prevent the water from flowing freely. So the water has to somehow go around, or it will, you know, the water level will rise and you'll get a little pool behind that obstacle. And in order to be really supple in your hips, you have to have a certain stability in your spine, lumbar spine especially, right? So you have to have a certain level of engagement of your core muscles that, you know, that are right next to the spine, that take care of the alignment of the spine. And these muscles have to provide your stability and your balance. So you don't need to use your legs and your hands for balance, right? No water skiing, no gripping. But yeah, just keep the your vertebrae stacked on top of each other with your abdominal and back muscles. And so then if you have that right amount of stability in around your lumbar spine especially, and the suppleness in your pelvis, then the energy impulse can travel through your pelvis, you know, and on through the cervical spine and, you know, down to the bit, right, or the nose of the horse. So you could say with your lower leg you bring the horse to the seat, right, and then with your seat you bring the horse to the bit, to the rein. And with your seat, you can regulate tempo, stride length, also the direction. You can steer, right? You can turn your horse, etc. With the way you know, follow the movement or not, or in the way in which you modulate and shape the movement, right? That energy impulse can be shaped, right, between your different aids. And then you have, of course, the lateral frame between the two legs and the two reins. That's like the walls of a channel in which the water flows, right? So you can give that a certain shape and so on, so that the energy stays in a narrow channel, which makes it flow more powerfully in a way, right? And instead of just spreading out all over the place. Yeah, and then when you feel the connection in your hand, then you can recycle that energy, so through the reins, through your forearm, to your elbow, and back to the hind leg on the ground. And then you can use your weight and your rein to flex the joints of the grounded hind leg, and that creates a certain elasticity in the gait, a certain springiness. So here we have the back to front cycle from your leg to your seat to your rein, right? The little three arrows. So that energy then travels along the top line of the horse, really, right, to the bit. And then here you have the return cycle, where you ground the energy through, in this case, through the outside hind leg. Create a connection from your body weight and the weight of the horse's forehand through the hind leg to the ground, and that creates the springiness, because the impulse of the hind leg transporting the body forward is an extension of the hind leg, and then the return cycle is the flexion, and this alternating between extending and flexing the joints creates fluidity and elasticity, etc. Yeah, so when you feel this energy impulse in your fingers, you can do different things with the rein. So here we have both cycles again. One of the things you could do is apply half halts, right? And for the half halt, you basically close your fingers, you connect your forearm to your pelvis and lumbar spine, and you use the weight of the horse's head and neck, and you add it to your own body weight and transfer that weight through the outside hind, in this case, into the ground. You could also, connect it to the inside hind and flex the inside hind leg. But here in the drawing, it's the outside hind. That's sort of a very standard scenario. If you don't have the connection from your midsection to your elbow, then your rein aids will not be passed on to the hind leg, but they get stuck in your upper arm or in your torso, and then whatever you do with the rein is basically limited on the limited to the horse's head. So you're essentially just pulling on the reins at that point, right? But it's not a real aid, unfortunately. So if your torso lacks the stability, your lumbar spine, etc., those muscles surrounding the lumbar spine and thoracic spine lack the stability, then your seat becomes a little bit like a black hole, right? And the energy impulses of the hind legs disappear in that black hole, and your rein aids disappear in there as well, right? So then that interrupts the circle of energy. If you are stiff and rigid in your hips or in your wrists, for example, then that's a little bit like having, you know, a whole bunch of boulders in your creek bed, and then, you know, the water can't flow either. So the energy circuit cannot be established that way either. It's, or if in case of an electric current, an electric circuit, it's like having a hole in your fence somewhere, you know, and then, you know, the electric circuit can't be closed. Yeah, so let's actually stop sharing this, and oops, I will show you another way of looking at it. So in the PDF, we've drawn or shown the whole thing from the side, right? But you can also look at it from above. So if you look at the little 4 horses here making a circle, so you can put your horse on a circle, and you could use your inside leg here to enlarge the circle. So you would apply this aid when the inside hind is in the air, outside hind leg is on the ground. So your body weight, your seat takes the horse out, but your inside leg tells the inside hind leg to step forward and out under the body, right? So you bring that hind leg more under your seat, because if the hind legs are not stepping under the body, then you will not be able to influence them with your weight or with the rein aids, right? So any weight aid or rein aid would then get stuck in the middle of the horse's back, and the horse's back would collapse underneath you, right? And they invert, they drop the back, the head goes up, and you don't reach the hind leg. So before you can apply a weight aid against the hind leg or a half halt to flex the hind leg, you need to have the hind leg underneath you, right? You have to feel like you're sitting on it. And that's something you can achieve very easily by enlarging the circle a little bit. And then once that inside hind leg steps forward and out underneath you, you can, well, catch it with a seat, channel that energy, you know, with your seat forward and into the outside rein. And then with the outside rein, you can make a connection to the outside hind leg and apply a half halt when the outside hind is on the ground. So essentially you're giving the aids at the same moment of the footfall sequence here, you know, with this little exercise. When the outside hind is down, inside hind is up. It's this enlarge, slow down. So the outside rein then really closes that circle of aids in a sense, and really it's like the grounding of your electric circuit, right? It sends the energy through the outside hind leg back into the ground. And like in the Spanish riding school, this enlarging was called the first test of the inside hind leg, right? And the half halt on the outside rein into the outside hind leg was called the first test of the outside hind leg. So that's a very easy way of establishing your circle of aids, right? It's a very easy way of essentially getting the horse on the aids. There's a lot in that little exercise that looks so simple, right? There's a lot of interesting content and interesting depth to it. You also, by enlarging and then half halting with the outside rein, you can make a transition from first degree bending to second degree bending. That's an old distinction that's not very commonly used anymore. First degree bending is what you do with the young horse. You create the bend by using your inside leg and a little bit inside rein. Basically, you're sending the horse out from your inside leg and rein into the outside aids. The inside rein is talking to the inside shoulder, not so much the inside part of the head, nose or jaw, but the shoulder. So essentially your inside knee and rein send the shoulder out, the inside lower leg sends the inside hind leg out, and your pelvis and your weight sends the horse's body mass, rib cage, etc., out. And as the horse enlarges, he will sooner or later find your outside leg and rein, right? And once the horse has found your outside rein, you can frame him between inside leg and outside rein, and that's the second degree bending, right? That's the next phase, the next stage. So that's this inside leg to outside rein that the trainers in the German tradition always like to talk about, right? That is typically not explained either. So, right. So that's how that works, right? So you can send your horse from your inside leg, through your seat to the outside rein. You make a connection again through your seat and weight to the outside hind leg, right? So you're using that now your midsection as the big intersection where all roads meet, right? Well, the leg and rein aids meet, left side and right side of the body meet, etc. Basically, all energy has to flow through your midsection. That's why your pelvis and lumbar used to be called the conductor in the orchestra of the aids, right? That coordinates all the aids with each other. And all the energy flows, energy impulses have to travel through that. So then you may have seen there's another way of looking at it, which is interesting as well. Let me see if I can find this again. This should be here. So here is a drawing that I found on Facebook, actually, and it's obviously from a French book, but whoever posted that didn't say which author, which book, so unfortunately, I can't tell you who it is. So here you see a line, a circular line going from the rider's inside lower leg around the inside hind leg of the horse, and forward underneath the belly, up through the withers, and then, along the top line down to the mouth, reins back, to the rider's hands. That has its reasons too, right? So your lower leg brings the hind leg of the horse forward and up under the belly, and with the help of your seat and weight, you can channel that energy up through the withers. So the horse lifts the withers, elevates the head and neck a little bit. And then, of course, you feel that again in your hands too. And then there's the connection from the rein through your hand. And then I would, instead of having the arrow go up to the rider's face, I would continue that circle through the rider's forearm, elbow, waist, back to the haunches, right? Basically connecting to that rear half of the figure eight. Essentially, it forms a kind of a figure eight, right? And from the rider's hand, like I said, I would draw the circle back to the hind leg circle. And that illustrates a little bit how energizing the hind leg, activating the belly muscles of the horse can help to lift the withers and lift the base of the neck. And that lifting of the base of the neck results in transferring weight to the grounded hind leg, right? You can take the weight of that inside shoulder. If you lift the withers here, and you can even use that left rein a little bit. It's like that rein indicates. You can use that rein and your seat to lighten the weight over the inside shoulder and transfer it to the diagonal hind leg. Horses in a diagonal movement looks like a piaffe here, right? That's sort of the one extreme, of the balance. But this would work in a trot just as well, right? Yeah. Using the movement energy of the inside hind leg to lift the withers and flex the outside hind leg. So that's a a nice little drawing too. So they're all in a sense approximations. They all depict aspects, you know, and it's a three-dimensional thing, right? It's you can picture it a little bit like ocean currents, right? There are always a number of different currents flowing at the same time, going in different directions, and it's the same here. There is this current that runs from the grounded hind leg over the horse's top line, right, and then back over the top line to the ground, to the grounded hind leg. Then there is the energy circuit that you see here from the hind leg swinging forward up through the withers and, you know, along the top line of the neck and, you know, back to the grounded hind leg. And then there is the lateral movement from the inside leg towards the outside rein, right? So the energy impulse, in a way, you could say, travels, you know, from inside hind towards outside shoulder, you know, inside leg to outside rein, back to the outside hind, and so on. So it's a three-dimensional loop. And so all these three aspects are at play at the same time in a sense, and you can use, you know, one or the other depending on what you're trying to achieve. You can emphasize the inside to outside aspect more. You can emphasize the back to front, or then connecting front to back, or this, you know, up through the withers and back to the outside hind leg, depending on what the horse needs or what you're trying to do at the moment. Another aspect that something that one of my old teachers always liked to mention is that the leg and the rein then refer the horse to the seat. Ultimately, like your leg brings the horse to the seat, right? If the hind legs go out behind or they go off to the side, your legs are there and bring the hind legs under the body. So in a sense, they're like guards, right? As long as the hind legs are under your seat, your legs don't really have to do anything. They're just there, right? They watch. As soon as the hind leg leaves, you know, backwards, sideways, wherever, your lower leg comes and tells the horse, step up, right? Step underneath me. And on the other end of the horse, if the horse kind of drops its back, loses balance, runs away, runs out from underneath your seat, the hand is there as a guard and says, no, come back to the seat, right? Don't run away from the seat. So the horse is then, you know, in the middle. As long as the horse is in the middle on your seat, legs and hands are passive. They don't need to do much of anything, right? They're just there. And as soon as the horse drops out from underneath your seat in any direction, your hands or your legs will then bring the horse back to that and then become passive again. And that's, I assume that's a little bit what Bushy was talking about when he told the German cavalry officers that he liked to have his horses in front of the leg but behind the bit, right? So, and they didn't understand. They thought he's crazy, right? You don't want the horse behind the bit. So, you know, we like the horse on the leg and on the bit, but I think they were probably talking about the same thing, right? So the horse needs to move his hind leg when you touch him with a calf, and he has to carry himself so he's not leaning on you, right, in the front. And then, of course, if he leans on you, you can give a half vault, send him back, rebalance, lighten up again. And then when the horse is there, then, you know, on the seat, you know, then you can do this descente de main et de la jambe, right? Just relax your hands, relax your legs, and don't get in the way, you know, let the horse do his thing. And, you know, until you have to change something or until the horse falls apart. So that's also an interesting way of looking at it, right? That you want your horse on the seat, you want him to be right in the middle underneath you. And as soon as he leaves the middle, and as soon as he's no longer really balanced and centered, you come, you know, with your leg or with the rein and tell the horse, no, get back to the middle, right? And then I'll leave you alone when you're there. So that can be a useful idea as well, right? And let me look at comments right here. And Corinne says, very nice explanation of the aids and the progress from the first and second degree bend. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this first and second degree bending is something you find in Soinic's book. It's something that you don't hear very much anymore today. Some of the older, riders and trainers may talk about. It's a, it's not a bad concept to have, that you think you'll start with your inside aids, send the horse out and forward into the outside aids, and then the horse is essentially framed between inside and outside aids, right? And then you can make a channel for the energy with your legs, your reins, and then you have a very high degree of accuracy actually with which you can guide the horse, right? Then it's like millimeter precision. So let me look on Facebook. There were a bunch of comments. I have to find the beginning. And Kathy Donahue. Hi, Kathy. It's great that you're watching. Yeah, you're familiar with the term, of course. And Tina says, Tina Anneli, really, Mao dear, I need a smaller horse then. Why? Let me look here. Everybody's saying hello. Oh, Maureen House says, this is so clear, Thomas. If only I had a younger body. Oh.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, there's always ways to compensate, right? And,
or to get smarter.
Yeah.
Instead of using
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
That
I mean, Steinbrecht says that the greatest masters often didn't reach their prime until they were a little older and didn't have the same strength that they had as young riders. Because when you're young and athletic, then if you use strength, right? If that's the easiest tool to use, you use strength, right? And you muscle the horse. It's what most young people do, right? And then as you get older and maybe you're not so strong, or maybe you're hurting in a few places, then you have to work smarter instead of harder, right? And then maybe you're a better rider because of that. And interesting too, Boucher actually didn't really invent his second manner that everybody considers to be way superior until he got hit by a chandelier, right? In Berlin, he was almost paralyzed, had no more strength, and then he had to come up with a different way of riding. Before that, he was using a lot of leg strength apparently, and then when he couldn't do that anymore, he had to completely revamp the way he was riding and to reinvent himself. Or Etienne Bourdon, same thing. I mean, didn't get hit by a chandelier, but he had, I don't know exactly what he had. He was some illness that left him very weak in his arms and legs, I think, and he just had to ride from the center and feel, and was apparently a brilliant rider by all accounts. So there's always ways of using certain disadvantages again, for your advantage. So then here Francine Cloutier says, I'm riding a quarter horse, and when we are connected on the aids collected, what kind of mouth contact are we supposed to expect from our horse? My mare tends to kind of avoid the contact. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, I think, in some of the last Facebook Live. So the quality and quantity of your contact depends on several factors like balance, straightness, pushing versus carrying, right? You should feel the energy impulse. Like if you feel nothing in your hand, it's not a good sign. Then the horse is a little behind the rein. And if he's behind the rein, he's probably also a little bit behind the seat or behind the leg. So then I would try to send the horse forward a little bit so that you feel something, right? That you feel this energy of the hind leg coming into your hand. You feel like the horse is stepping into your hand, into the bit, so that you can then connect it back to the hind leg. So of course there is such a thing as too much rein contact, that's unpleasant, where the horse is just leaning on you. But there's also such a thing as not enough rein contact. Because the horses that are not making contact with the reins at all, they often also drop their back, and they often get tight in the jaw, paw, under neck, etc. So the energy then doesn't really travel through the top line, through the back enough. So and you can play with that, of course. You can, if you feel like could be a little bit more, or I can't feel anything in my hand, see if you can send the horse forward a little bit from your leg and your seat, and see what happens. And then sometimes the horses go from one extreme to the other. The horse that was avoiding the contact suddenly gets heavy and leans on you, and then you can tell the horse, okay, now you're there, that's great, but now sit a little behind, carry yourself, and that's the. And you can use this enlarge, slow down, right? Send the horse forward and out from your inside leg, catch a little with the outside rein, recycle with a half halt, release, you know. And so you can build a contact that you like, you know, with your horse, in dialogue with your horse, essentially. Oh, Kathy says, if it hadn't been for Thomas, I would never have learned how to create energy in my suckback horse, Cavalier. No hope for a circle of eights if you have no energy to start with. That's very true. It's tricky if they don't feel like going to the rein contact, you know. And, yeah, and then, you know, if you have a horse that doesn't feel like going forward or making contact with your hand, then you can check, you know, why is that? You know, am I blocking somewhere, for example? You know, am I tight in my hips? You know, am I not supporting enough with my muscles around the lumbar spine? Does the horse have any muscle blockages in the paw, in the jaw, in the underneck, in the shoulder, in the rib cage, in the hind legs? Very often they don't go forward because the energy transmission breaks down, right? Because there's either a muscle blockage, or in some cases there is a hypermobility, right? When the base of the neck is hypermobile, they just overflex sideways or they curl up. That's a typical thing. Some horses get hypermobile in their hind legs. It's like a fishtail croup, just goes back and forth, and then it's very hard to create a steady push that arrives anywhere in the front because it's always escaping sideways, right? So that can happen too. Oh, Maya Ilemäki says so many light bulb moments. It's awesome. That's great. So. Siobhan Matson, can you explain how to create energy in the lazy horse? That's an evergreen too, right? We've done Facebook Lives around that, making a suckback horse go forward. I would try to find out first why the horse doesn't go forward. There could be a number of reasons, right? So one reason could be that you're somehow blocking the energy, right? There could be anything from stiff hips to tipped forward and pushing the horse's withers into the ground, or not having enough, stability in your spine. So your spine becomes like a black hole for the energy of the hind legs. Then it could be, like I said, a muscle blockage somewhere in the horse's body. If the pole is locked, for example, or if the underneck is locked, it's almost like a closed door. You know, and if you push against the door, it stays closed, it doesn't open. So, you know, the horse is then reluctant to actually fling himself at that door because he knows it's going to be unpleasant and, you know, the door is not going to open. And so when you try, for example, to drive more on a horse that doesn't want to go forward because there's a blockage somewhere, right? Muscle blockage, then it's not gonna, go well, but you'll end up, fighting with your horse essentially, right? But if you remove the blockage in the neck, the paw, wherever it is, right, then all of a sudden you feel like, oh, my lazy horse suddenly wants to go forward. He's moving, right? Some horses hold tension in the rib cage. It's like they hold their breath and they push their rib cage against your leg, and the more you squeeze and drive, the more they hold their breath and the more they push against you, and they get harder and they move less. Like, so you feel like, the more I drive, the less he goes forward, right? Some horses don't go forward because they're locked up in the pelvis, right? So you can unlock that with a little sidestepping. Blockages in the rib cage you can often unlock with like figure eights or volte right to a shoulder in left, where the horse just has to move a lot, right? And move his spine, shift his weight, etc. And so once you've identified why the horse doesn't want to go forward, you can loosen up those body parts that are tight. And then in addition to that, you can then teach the horse, like Kathy had described briefly in her post, that you can touch the horse with a whip, vibrate a little with the whip, and then vibrate faster, vibrate a little sharper, that the horse knows, this means move your feet. And then you can combine it with a light leg aid, like, so the horse understands a little touch of the leg means move, right? Pick the leg up, and then the whip starts lightly, and it's actually the speed of the vibration and the energy behind the vibration that then creates movement. It's not how hard you whack the horse, right? It's really how fast the whip can vibrate, and that means you have to have the right kind of whip. If it's too stiff, it's dead and slow, and it can't create energy. If it's too soft, it's like a wet noodle, you know, and that there is no energy behind it, and it's slow and hard to control. You never know exactly when and where it's going to touch, right? It's out of control. So it has to be just the right kind of material. And then you can teach the horse that when I vibrate, you go, and then as soon as they move, you take the whip off again, right? So that's basically explaining the leg aid to the horse, right? That's another thing too. But it's important that first you remove the brake, so to speak, take the foot off the brake, and then you can step on the gas, right? Otherwise it's counterproductive, right? And then you'll find that if you find the right combination and sequence of exercises, you can build energy. So it's just the right combination between bringing the hind leg under the body through some form of sidestepping, then flexing it maybe with a corner or a turn on the haunches or a volte or half halt or down transition, you know, and then letting the hind leg push again by maybe doing an up transition or lengthening the stride. You create this dynamics like when you picture a basketball, right? You press it into the ground, it bounces back, right? Because the ground will provide a resistance, then the downward force of your hand squeezes the ball together a little bit. The air inside the ball creates a counter pressure. As you let go of the ball, the air returns the ball to its original shape, so it bounces. And if you keep pressing down and releasing in the right rhythm and at the right intensity, the ball will bounce a little higher every time. And you can do the same with the horse's hind legs, right? Bring the hind leg under, sit on it, release it, let it push, let it extend again. Then it builds amplitude, right? Then it flexes more, it extends more, it flexes more, it extends more. Suddenly your horse wants to go forward, actually, right? And the horses who feel reluctant to go forward, they're often, their hind legs are often fairly extended, so that there is not really much room to open or extend the joints more or to push more. There's like no motivation there, right? Whereas if you make the horse squat first and you really flex the joints, then the horse feels like, oh my God, my thighs are burning now. This is starting to be like work. And then they're very motivated to open and extend the joints again, right? And if you do this, like I said, in just the right combination, sometimes it's like a few steps of shoulder in on the long side, then go on a diagonal, lengthen a few strides, shorten and collect again, maybe go shoulder in again, parallel to the long side, a few steps, another diagonal, forward again, things like that, right? And then the horses sometimes really warm up and they can suddenly become very lively and very motivated to go. So that's also an element that you can use. Just find the right sequence and combination of exercises, right? So Veronique Jolie says, mine runs off when I put my leg on. Do I keep it round his belly and retain him with my hands, or do I take my legs off? Yeah, that's the other extreme. When horses run away from the leg and you take the leg off right away, then you sort of reward that behavior, right? And then he will run away from the leg more and more. It gets more and more out of control. So it's counterintuitive, but with the horses that are lazy, you actually have to ride with a fairly light leg contact, and then create energy maybe through the vibration of the whip and the sequence of exercise, etc. And with the horse that tends to run away, you actually want to hug him and wait for him to relax into the leg. So you could put both legs on and have a little firmer contact, but soft, more reassuring, right? You can, when you touch the horse, you can always overlay that touch with messages for the horse, right? It could be move, or it could be relax, I'm here for you, I'll take care of you, right? So And depending on what energy you send with the touch, or what emotions you send along with the touch, makes all the difference sometimes, right? So you can have both legs on and have a little, maybe even a firm hug with both legs, but the sort of motherly attitude, like, it's okay, nobody's going to hurt you, I'm here for you, you know. And then sooner or later they relax into it, and then they tolerate the passive hanging leg, and then it's fine, right? So that usually works pretty well, right? So you have to resist the temptation of taking the leg off and not touching the horse at all, because otherwise it gets worse, you know. So, and I know it's hard sometimes to make yourself keep the leg on, you know, but it's like, you know, but then you can try and you know, give the horse stability with your seat, and half halt a little, use stirrup stepping to slow down, and, you know, use everything, all the different tools you have. You know, you can use smaller figure eights, for example, so the horse can't gather speed, right? So work him in a smaller area so he can't run away from you. You know, the hardest thing you can do is to ride straight ahead on a straight line, right? That's where you have the least support from the arena pattern or the exercise you're riding, and then it's all up to your seat and aids, right? So that's really the most difficult thing you can do. But if you take the horse that tends to run away, move it into a small space, and ride little intricate patterns where there's a lot of turning involved and a lot of, you know, maneuvering in small spaces, the horse has to rebalance and think. So, you know, then that distracts them sometimes from their anxiety, and they focus on you more, and then you can get them involved in some interesting type of work, and then all of a sudden they're not running away from your leg anymore, right? Because the running away from the leg could also be caused in part by the horse being unbalanced and feeling insecure, you know, like he might fall over. And as soon as you help him find his balance, he feels secure, he relaxes, right? So that's often a factor with those horses too. So things to investigate, things to research essentially is, again, it's a little bit like, why is he like that? Why does he run away, right? Very often these horses feel insecure because they're unbalanced, crooked, you know, and they feel like, oh, I could fall over and die, you know. So and you know, it's just like, you know, when the riders feel unbalanced and like they might fall off any second, they don't relax either, right? And they hang on and hold their breath, which doesn't help. And for the horse, it's the same thing, right? If he feels unbalanced and gets nervous and starts to run, he loses balance more and more, and so it escalates, right? So, and then you can help him find his balance, right? Yeah. So Joe Achievement says, very helpful description of the job the rider's legs should do. I think I'm struggling with the going back to passive part. Yeah, that's a human thing, right? That you know, once you flip the switch and your aid is on, it stays on. It's the same with half halts. A lot of people, once they close their hands on the rein and they half halt, they don't let go anymore. Sometimes that's because they feel like the half halt didn't go through, so I have to hang in there literally until the half halt goes through, and of course it doesn't, right? So when you give a half halt and it gets stuck, it's better to release again and see if you can bring the hind legs more under the body and try again, right? It's like when the hind legs are not underneath you enough and you try to apply a weight aid, the back will collapse under you. Or same thing with a rein aid. If you apply a half halt with the rein and the hind legs are not in the right place, right, then that rein aid will get stuck somewhere, and typically the back drops, the head goes up, and then the only thing you really can do is let go, release, even though, you know, it was a failure, so to speak, that half halt, it didn't accomplish anything, but you have to then regroup, right? Bring the hind leg under the body, try again, right? And again, you know, maybe place it better in the sense that pick a different pattern, pick a different spot in the arena, use an arena pattern on a certain spot in the arena to help balance the horse so he can't just deflect the half halt by inverting or getting crooked or sneaking the hind legs off to the side or out behind, etc. So that plays a big role too. You can ride strategically, so it's easier for you to keep all 4 feet under the body and close together instead of, you know, having the front legs or the hind legs escape somewhere, and then the horse gets crooked, falls apart, and then the aids don't go through anymore. Right? So yeah, so you see how much, what a big role balance and straightness also play in all of this, right? It's almost impossible to create a good circle of aids if your horse is strung out or if the horse is severely crooked, right? So it's a lot easier if the horse is balanced and straight. And of course, you can use the cycle of aids, the circle of aids, to improve balance and straightness and so on. And the more balanced and straighter they become, the easier the whole thing becomes. And the more you feel like I can just sit there, I don't need to do anything, I'm just here, right? And my horse is just cruising. So, yeah. So Mandy Jones says, I think my horse is challenging me. He used to be very responsive to light aids. Now he's being stubborn and ignoring. How can I improve his response? Again, depends on, well, what happened? Why is that? What has changed, for example? What is he ignoring? Is he ignoring leg aids? Is he ignoring rein aids? How balanced is he? How straight is he? You can test individual body parts, right? You could halt on the long side somewhere and see if you can move the croup in 90 degrees, back out 90 degrees. Just see, is the croup mobile? Can I move his hindquarters left and right? You could do the same with the shoulders. Can I move the shoulder 90 degrees to the left, 90 degrees to the right, right? And well, he'll either do it or he won't, right? And then if he does it, you can think about, well, was that easy or was that hard? Did he like it or did he hate it, right? Was it easier to the left or was it easier to the right? And then you can kind of narrow down problem areas, for example. And again, if the horse is ignoring you, it could be that he feels insecure because he feels unbalanced. And then they will brace, right? They will freeze and say, oh no, I'm not going there. I'm going to fall over if I do that, So in those cases, you can do a little bit work in hand too, and move the hips, move the shoulders in hand. Practice transitions, walk, halt, walk, trot, trot, halt, that sort of thing. So he becomes lighter. You can test yourself, investigate if all your aids are speaking the same language or if there's a contradiction. Your leg may say go, but maybe your hips tell the horse no stop, or your hands may tell the horse no stop, and then he doesn't know who to believe, right? Those kind of things. There's so many possible causes for why that can happen. So that it would be good to investigate that a little bit. And maybe if you have a trainer who can help you figure it out, then you can kind of make a checklist and check these different things. Sometimes certain things are easier to see from the outside than they are for you to feel while you're in the middle of doing it, right? Or if you have a friend who has a good eye, you can team up and help each other. So, yeah. So Sandy Stanger says, what do you look for or feel to make sure you're applying the half hold at the right precise moment? I was initially taught to do the half hold when the front outside leg comes back, just as I sit in the posting trot. After watching the presentation, I'm no longer sure. Can you tell us what you look for at this moment? Yeah, I talked about that in the half hold Facebook Live. Well, basically, when you half hold, you want to flex the joints of the hind leg that is on the ground more in order to either slow the tempo down, shorten the strides, or just transfer more weight onto the hind leg and rebalance the horse, right? Improve the uphill quality of the gait. And then you have to think about, well, which hind leg do I want to talk to, inside or outside, right? The moment in time that you're describing is when the inside hind leg is on the ground, which is fine, you can do that, right? But, well, if you want to address the outside hind leg, which is in a lot of situations maybe a better option, like if you want to prepare for a canter depart, it's better to half hold into the outside hind because that's the one that has to lift you. Or if you're preparing for a turn, then it's better to prepare to half hold into the outside hind because the outside hind leg is your anchor. It stabilizes you. It prevents the horse from falling into the turn so that the legs stay vertical and the horse can bend in his spine. So then in that case, it's the moment when the inside front goes back. But essentially you can feel the touchdown of the hind leg in your seat bone, right? When you're thinking of the trot movement, right? After the suspension phase, the horse's body comes down, you come down together with the horse, and one of the hind legs touches down, right? And your body and the horse's body are still kind of in that downward phase, right? Because of mass inertia, etc. But the hind leg, when it touches down, starts lifting the hip a little bit on the side. So the horse's hip comes up, your body comes down, so you meet, right? Your seat bone meets the hip of the horse. You feel a bump. It's like driving over a speed bump. And you can feel that touchdown of the hind leg in your fingers. If there is this connection from the hind legs along the horse's spine, you feel the hind leg swing forward and touch down. It's that feel of a pulse. Like if you put your fingers on your artery, you feel this very light movement, right? Of the light pulse in under your fingers, and it's similar in feel a similar feeling in the reins, and that tells you that okay, on that side where I just felt the bump on under my seat bone, that's where the hind leg has just touched down, or where I feel that little impulse in my fingers, that's where the hind leg has just touched down. And then you can decide whether you want to half hold into the inside or outside hind leg, right? And you could half hold with just emphasizing that downward movement in your whole body. Your pelvic floor can sink down, stay down a little bit, that you slow down the video that's playing, right? You can step a little bit into stirrup on that side. You can use one of the reins. You can use the rein on the same side. You can use the diagonal rein. You can use pelvic floor plus stirrup, pelvic floor plus rein, stirrup plus rein, any combination, right? And but yeah, you feel which hind leg is on the ground in your seat bone on the same side and in your fingers. And of course, you can look at the shoulder blades and extrapolate which hind leg must be on the ground at this moment, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, Mara. Peter says, I'm very tight in my lower back and hips and often not aware of what parts of the horse are moving. I've spent a year working on core and balance using a foam roller to release muscles and have joined the Aware Rider program. Any other suggestions for feeling what my body and my horse's body are doing? I seem to always let the reins slide through my hands, essentially dropping any attempt by my horse. Yeah, so tightness in your body often means that some muscles are working too hard because maybe other muscles are not working enough. So it could be that the muscles close to the spine are not doing their job of stabilizing. So the outer muscles that are responsible for movement are compensating. And then, of course, it's hard to feel, if the outer muscles are tight and stiff, they won't let anything go through, or they won't let the finer impulses of the horse go through. So working on your own balance on the horse would help, so the outer muscles can release. Then you can do yoga, of course. The Feldenkrais exercises will help to reorganize your body so that muscles can let go. That's a super effective way of doing it. And then when the horse pulls the reins through your hands, then you can try to prevent that by picturing the reins being attached to your pelvis, your hips, or your lumbar spine. So when you feel the horse taking the reins, so try not to open the fingers, right? Keep them a little closed. And then if you don't open your fingers, you will feel that the horse is trying to steal your elbows, right? He's trying to take your whole arm forward. And then in that case, you can tell the horse, fine, you can have my elbows, but you need to take my pelvis as well, right? I will not allow hips and elbows to be separated, right? So then you're not resisting really with your arms, but you're resisting in a sense with your pelvis, or your pelvis always has this forward motion going between your elbows, and then you feel whatever traction the horse puts onto the reins, you feel that more in your back muscles and less in your arms and fingers, right? So that works pretty well. Of course, it's easier said than done. I realize it's not something you can just do like that. But it's, if you have the right idea in your mind, you can work on that, and you can see, well, how much do I need to engage maybe my back muscles, or how well do I need to connect my elbows, upper arms to my pelvis and spine, so the horse cannot steal my elbows, right? So that I feel like I can hold the reins with my back muscles rather than holding them with my hands or my arms, right? It's a weird concept in a way, to hold the reins with your pelvis or your lumbar spine, or, but it actually works. So it's a little bit of a rethinking, reorganization of your body and your thoughts around rein contact, right? Yeah. Donna Woods says I warm him up and then start with my routine of stretching forward and forward walk, trot, canter. He's very compact. He has a sidewind when he's fresh in his right hind, slight tight in his hips, but even with stretching first, he still bucks hard a couple of times when taking off on the left lead. The first canter when I'm on, no, that's not much fun. Not on the ground, this vibrate. Would you do this on the ground first to teach the 8 before mounting small but huge motor? He doesn't do it after the first time. It tends to be worse without a show. Yeah, the compact horses, they can often be a little muscle bound and tight, and yeah, when he bucks in the canter depart, it's a sign that he was a little behind your leg and seat. That could be caused by a certain tightness somewhere, like in the back, in the rib cage, in the hips. So you could warm him up with lunging. You could do some trot canter departs at the lunge line to test the waters. You can do some work in hand to mobilize the hind. Yeah, lunging over cavaletti. Shana says that's true. Over cavaletti, they often let go a little bit more, or if they're behind the eights, and they'll buck at the lunge line over the cavaletti, which is better than with you on, right? And yeah, if this vibration of the whip is a new technique for both of you, then do it on the ground so that you find out how fast, and with how much energy you need to vibrate, and he can figure out his body without you on him. Might be a smarter way to go, right? And yeah, in hand. Yeah, so I would start probably with a little lunging, and maybe put some ground poles and cavalettis out and do some walk, trot, little canter over the cavalettis, or at the lunge line. Then work him in hand, maybe do a little, like leg yield on a circle, like let the inside hind leg cross a little on the circle line in hand. Do some turns on the forehand in motion to mobilize the haunches around the shoulders in both directions, so that he loosens up there. And then you already get a feeling for, well, how tight, how loose is he, how well does the energy travel through the body, how mobile are the hips. You can do turns on the haunches in hand too, test how supple are the shoulders. And so yeah, then you can scan the body, or a little bit in hand. You can also do some flexions to see, is the paw moving, is the neck moving, top of the neck, middle of the neck, base of the neck, right? The base of the neck is usually pretty supple in most horses. Pole is often the least mobile part of the neck. So you could spend a few minutes there, flexing that part if that's tight, and so with the idea that you want a supple, pleasant, balanced horse by the time you get on, right? So that there's no more major stiffness in the horse, so you can do more of the fine work when you're on his back, right? And that should help. Mariam says, I also have problem feeling what parts of the horse is moving. So are you talking about footfall sequence, that you don't know which leg is where, or which leg's on the ground, which leg is in the air? So yeah, I explained that, hind leg, feeling the hind legs in the walk and trot. In the canter, it's different. It's easier, right? Than when the withers are up at the highest point of the canter stride, the outside hind is on the ground. Then in the next moment, the shoulders come back to the ground, right? And then your pelvis gets pulled forward. That's the second beat when the main diagonal is on the ground. And the third beat of the canter stride is the lowest point. And that's when your knee gets pulled down, inside knee gets pulled down at the same time. And you may be able to feel that shoulder movement in your knees in the walk and the trot too. When the front leg touches down, your knee drops a little bit, right? And you feel the movement of the shoulder blades of the horse in your thighs and knees a little bit too, and you can glance down and then extrapolate, right, where the hind legs are. Okay, so that was it, yeah. Then, if you have a hard time feeling it, you could ride in front of the mirror and watch one particular leg and just see, what do I feel in my body when that leg is on the ground, regardless of whether it's front leg, hind leg, left side, right side, just see if you can feel it. Then you can define in your own body, when I get this feeling, the right hind is on the ground. When I get this feeling, the left hind leg is on the ground, right? And you may feel a little differently than I do, right? And ultimately, it doesn't matter really what you feel, as long as you can coordinate a certain feeling with a certain leg. If you don't have a mirror, you could look at shadows, right? If you're riding, in a light arena or outside, and it's bright enough that there are shadows, then you can also watch with a certain leg, right? The shadow of a certain leg, and then try to feel what am I feeling at that moment. Or you can team up with another person. That doesn't even have to be a rider. It could be anybody who can tell you now, when one specific leg is on the ground, right? Or then they can watch while you tell them now. Like, for example, you decide, I want to call out the outside hind leg when it touches down. So every time it feels like it touches down, you say now. And then the person on the ground can say yes or no. You got it right, or no, you got it wrong. And so that can be helpful too, right? You could also ride on pavement in the walk, for example. Then you hear it really loudly, right? You hear each leg touching down. And then you can check, what do I feel when the right front is down, left front, right hind, left hind. These are all possible strategies. What also works is if you put, for example, your inside hand on the inside hip of the horse, and you feel the touchdown as the hip comes up. And then you could put your inside hand on your inside hip, and then you feel how the horse's inside hip moves your inside hip. And then you could do the same thing with your outside hand on the outside hip of the horse, and then your outside hand on your outside hip, etc. So that's also a way of learning to feel it, right? So different ways, whatever works for you. Okay, let me look back at Zoom, make sure, see if there were more comments. Oh, Georgina says, Thomas, sound keeps getting louder and quieter. Sorry.
Maybe bring the mic closer to you.
Yeah, I can. Well, no, it's almost too late. I mean, what could be, if that happened while I had the board up, it could be that the board was blocking the sound sometimes a little bit. So hopefully it's a little better now. And Susan says, very useful. I will try and visualize these diagrams as I'm writing. It's almost to me that my center of gravity needs to be lowered and concentrated around my leg and seat, and the hands become part of the seat almost. Exactly. Hands should be part of the seat, and you can visualize your rein aid as a weight aid. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. So your hand takes the weight of the horse's head and neck and adds it to your body weight. And like as you close your fingers, you can visualize yourself pressing the hind leg that's on the ground down into the footing and then releasing again, right? And when you give a half fold, when you use a rein for the half fold, you should only close your fingers. You should not curl your wrist. You should not go back with your hand, because if you feel like I have to curl my wrist and move back, then the horse hadn't really reached out to your hand. He hadn't really stepped into the bit on that side yet, right? So then release, send the horse forward to the hand, and then try again. And then when you feel like I have contact with the hind leg, I can feel the hind leg when I squeeze my fingers, then you feel like your body weight is actually what brings the aid through, right? You're really using your body weight and the downward part of the motion, of the horse's back, to press the hind leg a little into the ground. And yeah, the rein just adds the horse's head and neck to your own body weight, right? So it's a whole body movement in a sense, right? And it's all down, and then the release is sort of, allows the hind leg to bounce back up. And there is no backward movement, hopefully, in your hand. If there is a backward movement, release, catch yourself, send the horse again a little bit with your leg and seat towards the bit, and then try again. Okay, Georgina says it's okay now. Oh, good, thank God. Donna Wood says, thank you, we'll try the Cavaletti. Hadn't done that for a while, great idea. He's a very sensitive guy and can go from relaxed and mobile to tight again in a second without legs on. That makes it difficult. He has to have that hug for confidence. Such a huge difference with that. Oh, good. Thank you. I'll work on mobility with turn on the haunches. Hadn't done that for a while either. Thank you so much for feedback. Love your webinars. Thank you. Yes, scan the horse's body for tightness, stiffness. Yeah, so sometimes you move the hips left and right, and move the shoulders left and right. Shift the weight from the left pair of legs to the right pair of legs. Change the bend, and that will give you an overview in 30 seconds, like which parts of the horse can move and which parts are stuck, right? And yeah, if you don't address a certain body part for a while, for a few days or weeks or months, then it may lose mobility, just like our body does too, right? And then suddenly it could be that certain things seem very hard or impossible that used to be good. The horse used to be able to do them really well, and suddenly it's like he's never heard of this before, because you just haven't asked that question in a while, right? So it's a good thing to regularly scan the body and check. Can you move your hips? Can you move your shoulders? Can you support yourself with a left pair of legs? Can you support yourself with a right pair of legs? Can you flex your spine, like from pole to tail, Can you move the skull by itself? Can you maybe just move the top half of the neck a little bit, etc. And typically with pretty much every horse, you'll find something that could move a little bit more smoothly. It's like you find a joint that needs to be oiled a little bit, right? So, and then you can work on that a little bit, right? Yeah, very good. So Georgina says, yes, another great webinar. I've learned so much from you guys. Thank you. That's awesome. That makes us happy. See, even Phoenix has showed up now. Today he waited a long time. So let's see. We've been at it for over an hour. If you don't have any more questions, I'll start wrapping it up. We have another Facebook Live on Thursday. How do I get my horse on the bit, which is sort of a continuation of this topic in a sense, right? You can use your circle of aids to put the horse on the aids and ride him on the bit and through the pole and back. Oops, don't knock over my computer, Phoenix. And next week we have a challenge.
Yep, and I can give them the link.
Yeah.
I don't, it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, Shana
it'll work.
We'll give you the link. So it's
They get in now if they want.
Okay, so the challenge next week is 5 days again about rein contact and connection issues, essentially, right? With some tips on how to maybe improve it, and
Totally free.
Totally free as always. Our challenges are always fun. They're always a little different. They're a different topic every time. This should be interesting and fun again. And I know that rein contact, riding the horse on the bit, etc., is big struggle for most people. For a long time it was for me. And typically people can tell you, your horse has to go on the bit more, but they can't tell you how. So so hopefully we can help a little bit with that, with our challenge and these Facebook Lives. And Claire says, thanks so much for your information. Never gets old, and can't wait to ride again and work on my circle of eights. Awesome. B.D. O'Connor says, thank you. You're both so generous with your understanding. Oh, thank you. Francine Cloutier says, thank you so much for your precious help, especially for free, which is incredible. Well, our pleasure. It's great if it helps. So it's fun, you know, when we can facilitate learning for people. Hey, Phoenix, stop that. So, okay. Well, I think that's pretty much all for today.
Yes.